Welcome to the LIAMforum audience. We're on day 4. It has been very exciting so far with wonderful panels, with a lot of information, a lot of knowledge. I have learned a lot from the experience. Today's panel is on greening ahead, agriculture, forestry, and sustainable development, an extremely important topic. When we think about mining, the footprint of mining in the world is relatively tiny. Agriculture and forestry and deforestation and agricultural overexploitation are very significant issues for us. Most of the world's population lives in areas that are thus affected, and we need to look forward to see how we resolve them. On our panel today, we have 4 experts. Naresh Tebatazan, who is an adjunct professor retired from the School of Environmental Sciences at the University of Guelph. Martin Baudouin-Nadeau, who is the founder and CEO of Viridis Terra International. Moshe Nadler, who is the managing partner and CEO of Agricora Technologies. And Jason Clay, Senior Vice President, Markets and Executive Director of the Markets Institute at the World Wide Fund, the WWF. What I will ask the panelists, because we are limited in time and there is a lot of information, is to briefly, for a minute or so, say who they are, what their background is, and what brings them to this panel, following which Naresh will start with his presentation, and we'll continue with Martin, followed by Moshe, and with Jason closing up the dialogue. After that, we will open up the conversation to the panel as a whole and to questions and answers. So let's start with Naresh to tell us briefly who he is, why he's here.
Yeah, my name is Naresh Tebatazan. I'm originally from Sri Lanka, came to Canada to do my postgraduate studies. Then I got a job with the university as an associate professor, and I just retired in April. Now I'm an adjunct professor. So my childhood was in a coconut estate plantation, and environmental sustainability was very important for us. And therefore, I focused my research on agroforestry, which is an integrated land use system that I'm going to talk about.
Wonderful, thank you. Martin?
Yes, Martin, founder and CEO of Viridis Terra. I'm a forest engineer by trade, but I move quickly more towards the environment. One thing I was seeing is that the natural resources is very important. The whole economy run around natural resources. Everything we build, we create, is made of natural resources: a phone, computer, cars, houses, food. So it's very important for us, but it's even more important to do it sustainably, to mine or to exploit the natural resources sustainably, so we can ensure that future generation will have access to these natural resources. So that's the reason why I started to work on Viridis Terra. We started Viridis Terra to bring new solution to the restoration of degraded land, because in the past we were just extracting resources, and has led to the degradation of a lot of land, both in the extractive sector and the forestry and agricultural sector. So my goal is to bring a solution to not only restore it, but to manage sustainably after that, to create value for our stakeholders and ensure all the natural resource sector will be sustainable in the future. Will have a positive impact on all levels. So that's what Viridis Terra is about.
Merci, Martin. And then Moshe in Israel. Hi, Moshe.
Hi. Good evening. I'm from Israel. I'm an agronomist. I studied agronomy. I've been involved in big agriculture projects all over the world, also in water treatment projects and mining. And in the last 3 years in the United Arab Emirates, I'm involved in their strategic food security plan. So I'm here to talk about all this experience combined.
Wonderful, thank you. And last but not least, Dr. Clay, please, out of Washington, D.C.
My name is Jason Clay. I'm an anthropologist by training, farmer by birth, and my focus of my career has been on human rights and the environment, given that soft commodities and food production have had the biggest footprint of any human activity on the planet, as we heard earlier. But also, I think supply chains are probably the biggest single DEI issue that we have to work on. So it brings all those issues together for me, and that's what I'll be talking about today.
Thank you very much. So without much ado, and I want just to point out to our audience, whom we hope many young people are there, at the end of the presentations, each of the panelists will address where were they at when they were 18, 19, 20, and if they were that age now, where would they be looking for to explore future careers? So with this, I'm going to give the microphone to Naresh for him to start his presentation, please.
Thank you so much. So the title given to me today is The Potential of Agroforestry to Answer Climate Concern. And next slide, please. And in that respect, I would like to start my presentation by defining what is agroforestry means. It is a plan and deliberate integration of trees into agro-ecosystems in order to derive environmental, ecological, economic, and social benefits in a unit land area in a sustainable manner. So the sustainability feature is a key feature in agroforestry land use systems. Next slide, please. Because these land use systems are sustainable, they contribute to the 3 pillars of food security, especially under extreme climatic conditions. Every sector in the world, or every agriculture sector in the world, is being affected by extreme climatic conditions. The presence of trees in agro-ecosystems, because they modify the microclimatic condition, when extreme weather occurrences happen, the annual crops have a chance to thrive and produce some products because of the microclimatic modification brought about by the presence of trees. So production translates into household income, and household income translates into more accessibility for food for the resource poor household, and then adding value for the crop commodities as well as for the tree commodities contributes to food utilization. And the next slide, please. Because agroforestry land use systems contribute to food and income security, it is very important to note that these land use systems can directly contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals 1 and 2, no poverty and zero hunger. Next slide, please. And as a result, several global organizations like IPCC, and the next slide I will show that the Food Agriculture Organization, are all promoting such land use systems globally because it has the ability to contribute to climate change mitigation. When it comes to agriculture, forestry, and other land use, IPCC states that agroforestry not only contributes to carbon sequestration, it also contributes to soil erosion control, and thereby it can augment soil organic carbon sequestration. Because the trees utilize the residue nitrogen when there's no crop cover, it also contributes to nitrous oxide emission reduction potentials. Next slide, please. And then this slide is what FAO is saying, that you don't have to read the text, but what they're saying is by 2050, we had to feed about 9.5–10 billion people. So integrated land use system becomes of utmost importance globally in order to produce food, enough food for the 9.5 or 10 billion people. Next slide, please. And in this respect, quite recently, Canada, the CBC, and you can use that link and you can read the article. Among the different land use systems, CBC has highlighted agroforestry to be the #1 land use systems that we need to adopt in the Canadian landscape in order to contribute to climate mitigation aspects. Next slide, please. And this is, you can see, this is in Ethiopia. You can see that this vast area is devoid of vegetation, but you can see this convent made a concerted effort to plant trees in their convent compound, and how they were able to green the area. And such endeavors are being now undertaken globally, and greening the Sahara Desert for one project, and also Sahel region and Sub-Saharan Africa is also under the greening of the landscape through agroforestry land use systems. Next slide, please. And these slides, we can go through quickly. If you look at Asia, the same thing. So the point I'm trying to put across here is globally, whether it's Africa or Asia, tree integration has become important, and you will see such tree integration. This, what you see is a paddy field where you get your rice, and you can see tree integration there. Next slides, please. You can see that in some part of Indonesia and Thailand, they even grow trees along the bunds of the paddy field. Next slide, please. And this slide is an important one. This is an FAO study undertaken a few years ago where they monitored trees outside the forest. They wanted to see how many acreages there are trees integrated into agriculture ecosystems. And they came with an astonishing number of 1 billion hectares of trees that are present in non-forested areas. That means they are in agricultural landscapes. Next slide, please. And you can see the areas that they captured is what you'll see here. This is the multi-strata agroforestry systems where you try to capture solar radiation at different trophic levels. You have a higher canopy strata, the lower canopy strata, and you can see that more food crops are integrated in the multi-strata system. And this is the type of land use system they captured in the FAO satellite imagery. Next slide, please. And then this you can see a shea butternut tree. And if you go to northern Ghana and in West Africa, northern area close to Burkina Faso region, I worked in those region, and this is the type of land use system that you will see, which contributes to greening of the agricultural landscape. And the crops are grown underneath the trees. The next. And if you look at the global aspect, the Nature Conservancy has listed the top land use system that can cost effectively bring about climate mitigation. And you can see in that trees in cropland is occupying the sixth place. Next one, please. And you can see that from Nature Conservancy, you can see agroforestry has been marked number 1, which tackles climate, which also contributes to food and water sustainability and protect land. Next one, please. And it contributes to ecosystem services. I don't want to go in detail, and during the discussion, I can explain more. Next one, please. So if you look at the temperate agroforestry systems, there are many land use systems that we can enhance in the temperate region. Next one, please. For example, you can see, next slide, please. Oh, no, they have jumped few slides. Can you go back, please? Go back. Yeah. So this is the alley cropping system from the University of Guelph, where annual crops are grown in between the tree rows. And then this is again, we have documented through research that the carbon sequestration potential of such agriculture system is about 3 to 3.5 times more carbon capture compared to a conventional bean crops. What you see is a soybean crop. Next one, please. So there are a lot of degraded agricultural streams in the agriculture ecosystems. Next one, please. By integrating trees into the degraded streams, not only you can address the water quality issues, but you can also address the carbon sequestration aspects. And this is another land use system for the temperate region. Next one, please. And we have digitized, we worked on a 7,000 square kilometer watershed area, and about 85% of the streams have been digitized by riparian buffers in the Grand River Conservation Authority. That's 11, so they have about 11,000 linear kilometers of water stream. And if you plant trees on both sides, you can get about 22,000 linear kilometers of trees in one watershed in the province of Ontario. That is equivalent to about half the global world circumference. So you can see how impact the agroforestry land use systems could have. Next one, please. And trees and patch and animal is one type of land use system. The point I'm trying to drive here, all methane emissions by the cow. I know IPCC is saying we should all eat less meat, and the meat production has more carbon footprint, but there is a way. If all these methane emissions are translated to carbon dioxide equivalent, and if those carbon dioxide is captured by the trees, you could have a carbon neutral livestock system as well. Next one, please. And it also contributes to animal welfare. If you go to any part of the world during the hot sun midday, you can see all livestock gathering under a tree shade because they cannot withstand the heat stress on their body. So a silver pastoral system can address animal welfare issues as well. Next one, please. These are windbreak systems to control soil erosion. If you control soil erosion, you can also augment carbon sequestration in the soil. Next one, please. And then forest farming system, growing non-timber forest products under forest canopies is another way you can enhance climate mitigation. Next one, please. So in concluding remark, we can say that agroforestry systems contribute to food security and income security while addressing climate mitigation aspects. It preserves the natural resource base through the presence of trees, nutrient cycling, biodiversity, interdependency. But however, we need more policies to promote such land use systems globally. Next one, please. Thank you, and I will be happy to answer question. I'm exactly 10 minutes. 10 minutes, yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant. Brilliant, very impressive. And they say picture is 1,000 words.
Yes.
You've shown many pictures, and I'm very grateful. They opened my eyes. That map of Ontario with the thousands of kilometers is an impressive statistic. It all shows us the potential. With this, I'd like to thank Naresh and introduce Martin to tell us how he got here and what he's doing and what his dream of achieving is.
Thank you, Raziel. To start, I could say that Verestera started in the extractive sector. So when we launched the company, we founded it in 2015. And one thing that is important to consider in the mining sector is that if you look at the transition toward a low carbon economy, we're gonna need 5 to 10 times more minerals to produce as much energy from renewable energy that we will need from fossil fuel. So that means that the mining sector will have a very important role to play towards to fight climate change and to do that transition to win the fight against the climate crisis. And one thing I've been worried a lot in the last few years is that I see a lot of these new projects that cannot get the social license to operate, and for a good reason, because in the past, the mining companies were coming, doing extraction, then 10, 20, 30 years later, they were leaving leaving the environmental liabilities to the local government, or with well, sometimes they did some reclamation and closure, but you know, it was with a very short-term vision to be able to retrocede the mining side to the government, and so has brought a lot of these environmental liabilities that we have today. I visited some communities in DRC in Africa that, you know, there's a lot of copper contamination. The site is closed since the 80s. They have problem of health. They have to close school when it's windy because they start spitting bloods. And so all these kind of things that, because they were only thinking about extracting, but not more about sustainable development of a region where you're working. It brought a lot of challenge that we have right now with the acceptability of a lot of this project. So when I started to develop the company, I wanted to start to bring a new solution that will be sustainable to restore these degraded land and create value to the local communities. So we started to focus more on technologies that would follow the natural processes, because we know that when you have a healthy ecosystem, it's resilient and it can go forever. The sustainability comes from there. So we started to work with ecological engineering, ecological restoration on site that were that didn't have much contamination. So we're able to work directly on the waste rock, on the tailing, without much inputs, but using accelerating the natural processes. So the technology we have developed, it was using seedlings, or micro cuttings of native species that we can establish directly on the site. And usually what we do before we bring this technology to accelerate with low input, accelerate the establishment and the growth of the forests or the natural ecosystem, we do a study to identify what is happening normally into these natural ecosystem. And usually within 3 to 5 years, you start seeing already some natural regeneration close to the natural ecosystem that brings a lot of information about the microsite condition, the species that help to in the natural ecosystem, that help to start the succession and everything. And so that was a big focus. We started to work on that. Of course, it's more investment initially for the mining companies, but they don't have to go back 10, 20, or 30 years later. And when all the technology we have developed, where already some of our mentors at university already have proven that in the past, that when you establish that natural ecosystem, you know, you can, and I could show a few pictures. Just here you can see what is happening with the traditional techniques. We're using exotic species, just bring a cover to control erosion or short term. But what happened between 5 to 35 years, there's a degradation. Usually that happens most on the tight. And sometimes when there is no degradation, there's no succession. Here you can see in the Oysen, a mine site, they have to go back 30 to 20 years later to put a block plastic just to plant seedling so they can regrow the forest. Sometimes you have they are replaced by invasive species, so it brings a lot of problem in the past for. So that's where, by doing a study early on, you can identify the species, what is happening naturally, and use the technology to mimic what is happening in the field, select the right species and everything. So we have developed technologies from seedlings. We can substrate that we can plant directly on waste rock, mine tailings. Also from seeds, we can grow a dense forest directly. This is a waste rock. This is a site that is highly contaminated with arsenic on the right, and you have the forest growing right now. After 3 years, the content of arsenic have decreased over time because all the new organic matter has come back, just reducing the concentration. We also develop a lot of biofertilizers that help increase the survival and the growth and the productivity on this degraded land. We have shown we can increase by 70% of survival and by more than 2 times the growth and the productivity on the degraded land. Here, just to show you an example of, on the top left, it was restored with ecological restoration approaches. Like with local species, like a key species was chosen after 7 years. This is in Dominican Republic. After 7 years, you start seeing colonization of a lot of different species. After 20 years, this tree was the one that was used at the beginning, but now it's dead. But you have a tropical forest with 150 different species, LT. Someone that doesn't know that there was a mining site there, they cannot tell. Another site, I use more traditional approach with short-term vision. You can see after 15 years, you start to have degradation, erosion start again. So the environmental liabilities is still there. It brings a lot of, so that's very important to start to have that long-term vision and on this approach to be able to restore sustainably. Also on the eco, when we work on contaminated site, we have more an eco-engineering approach, because just working with ecosystem and nature on the short term, it does not contain the contaminant or protect. So usually what we do is we bring some civil engineering approach with geomembrane or stuff like that, but we ensure it can receive the ecosystem. So at the same time, we do some plant engineering to ensure that with that good mix of civil engineering and restoring the natural ecosystem, we're able to have high impact and efficiency on the short term, but also on the medium and long term. Because the civil engineering, usually they have a time of life, so usually their efficiency reduce over time. So by mixing the two together, civil engineering with nature, that's where we are able to ensure that it's sustainable over time. Because as the ecosystem develop, it becomes more resilient. It develop its own buffer naturally. So that's some of the new approach that we have been pushing hard. And some people were saying in the past, you need to control vegetation. So I'm putting a civil engineering structure, but you need to control vegetation. But you cannot do that during 3,000 years, 5,000 years, 100,000 years. So it's very important to have that mentality of how we reach to a place where nature is able to stay healthy and ensure there's no environmental liabilities anymore. So that's something that we have worked very hard on that side, and we started after that to go beyond this approach that only focusing on restoring the mine site, but having an approach more on landscape level, which is the new barriers that we are going after, is that we have developed a business model where we are able to bring capital, private capital, into project in landscape. So it can be the mining companies that invest, or it can be also all type of impact investor, like corporation that have net zero objective or nature positive objective. So we bring the capital, we work directly with the landholders, where in the landscape where we are present, we sign contracts with them. So, and we bring the technology, restoring the land with them and with technical assistance. And as the new forest and agroforest grow, they start producing goods and services again, like timber, agri-food products, medicinal plants. When it's sold at the market, it's nature positive commodities. The profit are shared equally between the investor and the landholder. And also, a part of the carbon removal is owned by the investor. So already a mining company that invests in the landscape near the mining site, we can bring carbon removal that help them reach net zero. We can offset their biodiversity loss due to mining, because we create biodiversity into the landscape working with the local communities. And at the same time, it's not a cost, because there is a return. So over the mid and long term, you can ensure that it's not a cost anymore, and the mining companies have a positive impact on all levels, because when they are closing and restoring sustainably the land, the environment when they are is in a better place sustainably than it was before they got there. So that's that vision of social, environmental, and economics impact at all levels, so that the mining sector become a driver of sustainable development, not just extracting resources.
Wonderful.
So to finish, I will just share a video.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
La degradación del ecosistema amazónico es un problema que llama mucho la atención a nivel mundial.
Como le digo, a 35 años que estoy hablando de este año, ya se ha visto un cambio diferente totalmente.
Raziel, c'est une entreprise à mission en technologie verte qui se spécialise dans la restauration et le reboisement à grande échelle de terres dégradées. Présentement, plus de 25% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre est causée par la déforestation, la dégradation des terres et le changement d'utilisation des terres. Ça a un impact sur les communautés, ils n'ont plus des ressources en eau, en nourriture, ils ont des problèmes de santé. C'est là qu'on va avoir un impact énorme pour créer de la richesse pour les futures générations. C'est important de penser aux prochaines générations parce que c'est ceux qui vont être le plus impactés par les crises climatiques et écologiques qu'on vit présentement. Raziel, avec son véhicule d'investissement To The Life, permet à tous ceux qui veulent en faire partie de joindre l'aventure. Le but, c'est vraiment de rendre accessible la lutte contre les changements climatiques et la lutte contre la dégradation de la nature. Dans le modèle d'affaires, on amène la biotechnologie avec la technologie et l'innovation sociale ensemble.
Y entonces lo que nosotros hacemos en colaboración es apuntar hacia objetivos que permitan solucionar necesidades de poblaciones que son aliadas a esta propuesta, de recuperación del ecosistema, de producir de una forma limpia, también valorar los conocimientos tradicionales de los pueblos indígenas.
Unos ingenieros a sensibilizarnos en temas de la agroforestería. Una idea que el tema de la reforestación es un tema muy importante para y eso nosotros hemos visto, hemos llegado a pensar que sembrar madera o trabajar en temas de agroforestería es muy rentable.
Que ce soit des individus, des entreprises ou des investisseurs institutionnels, vous pouvez tous devenir carboneutres, réduire vos émissions de gaz à effet de serre tout en créant de la richesse pour tous et nous aider à accomplir notre mission qui est de restaurer et reboiser des millions d'hectares de terres dégradées sur la planète.
Pienso de que el apoyo de Viridis, la tecnología desarrollada por CEPIAGRI, van a complementar muy bien en cuanto a esta necesidad urgente que vamos teniendo en la Amazonía, ¿no?
Résistera, un mot, c'est avenir.
Merci, Martin. That was brilliant. So we'll jump straight to Moshe for his presentation, and then we'll go to Jason. Moshe.
I thought what I can share with you, with the people that joined the conference, and based on my experience, I decided to bring together 3 different projects, countries, and from the mining and from the agriculture industry. So we'll talk about copper, we'll talk about algae, and we'll finish with guacamole. But the bottom line is the importance of locally grown food, why it is important for the growers to grow locally, and for us as consumers to be aware of what we purchase. Next slide. Next, yes. So I've already talked about my background. I've been involved in agriculture projects, big agriculture projects all over the world, mainly in Latin America, but not only. Mining, mainly for heap leaching, as the manager of the global mining division for Netafim, the biggest manufacturer from Israel of drip irrigation. And the water treatment project mainly in Central America. The last line, I was also a major in the IDF, so this will answer the question of Raziel, what I did between 18 to 20. I just served in the army as everyone in Israel. It's obligatory. So next slide, please. Okay, I'll start with the experience from the UAE. I was in the last company I worked for. I was asked to come up with an idea how to help the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, with the food security plan they have. They have a food security plan for until 2051. In 2051, according to their plan, they'll be the first in the world in the food industry, in the food security index, the world food security index. They want to be #1, and with the money they have, I think they can make it. The problem, we started the program when COVID started, so it even emphasized more the interruption of global supply chain, the lockdown, and together with a higher risk for those who doesn't consume like the Mediterranean diet, we came up with the conclusion that it will be better to grow more food locally. That's the basis. Next slide. The problem in the UAE, with the money they have, they know how to buy a solution for the problems. They usually go for the Rolls Royce in every problem they have. They buy the best, but it doesn't necessarily suit the problem, the local problem they have, the unique problem, challenges they have in the UAE, which is basically a desert. What we offer them to do is to create a center of excellence for food security technologies and to introduce new agro-technologies from Israel and from other countries, and to develop them and to adapt them to the challenges that are unique for the area, because in the UAE they don't have this ecosystem of local universities, especially if we're talking about agriculture or for agriculture or food tech. So we offer them to create like a hub, a center of excellence. Next slide. The main pillar of this center of excellence, of this hub of solutions, as we suggested, was for alternative protein. We see proteins, in my opinion, as the main part of any food security plan. Today in the UAE, they're looking at other solutions. We offer them to focus on alternative protein because it's very difficult, almost impossible, to grow traditional crops in this area. They don't have the water, they don't have the land, the temperatures are extreme. So we suggested that they'll focus on alternative protein, and there are dozens of companies, startup companies, and already also commercial companies in Israel and in other countries dealing with alternative proteins, from mushrooms, from insects like crickets, and algae like the spirulina. Next slide. Talking about spirulina, in an article from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations from 2011, it was named the best food for the future of mankind. It's actually a superfood. Next slide. It's not just a superfood, it's very sustainable. The efficiency, the yield per land is much higher than other crops that will produce protein. The water efficiency is much higher. It's food. It already has all the certification, and the waste from growing spirulina is almost zero waste. And the main advantage of spirulina that it likes hot temperatures. It can grow in the desert, and actually it transformed the sun energy to protein. As simple as that. Next slide. Those are pictures I took in a spirulina farm in Israel. There are two big projects in Israel growing spirulina. One of them is in the desert in the south of Israel. We grow spirulina, as you can see in the pictures, in the upper middle part of the picture, like in greenhouses. And then this company produces pods, frozen spirulina. It's not sold as dried powder, you probably are familiar with. This spirulina is sold fresh, frozen. So it keeps all the nutrients, and from this pod you can make juice, you can mix it with other foods, and the company is already working on products like a meat-like or fish-like product, even with other colors, not just green color, but other colors. This crop, this algae, is perfect for the desert, perfect for the UAE, perfect for any food security plan, and it's cheap to establish a new project and to grow it. Next slide. This is what they did in the UAE after we recommended, I mean, my presentation is short, but the presentation I presented to the Minister of Food Security in the UAE was a long presentation with all the documentations and all our recommendations, but they went to vertical farming. Vertical farming is really is now in the, I think it's fancy, and they just inaugurated a huge project in Dubai, near Dubai International Airport, and they are going to grow 1,000 tons of lettuce, of leafy greens, in the desert, in this project that is called Bustanica. and these letters will go mainly to those of you who will fly in the Emirates airline. So nothing to do with actually with food security plan, but this is how they like it in Dubai. Everything is big, everything is fancy, nothing to do with proteins for food security plan. So this is the United Arab Emirates story. And next slide. Just a few words about avocado. We consider avocado also as a superfood. I don't have to mention all the benefits of eating avocado. I was looking in Google Maps for a Mexican restaurant. I didn't have to look. You have one just in your campus. It's called Burrito Boys. You're probably familiar with. And they serve, of course, Mexican food and guacamole. And if you think about ordering an extra order of guacamole, think twice. Why? We can see in the next slide. You in Canada, you consume a lot of avocado, and the consumption is going up every year. But bear in mind that avocado are water intensive. It takes 2,000 liters of water to produce just 1 kilo of avocado, 227 liters for one avocado, plus huge amount of fertilizer, pesticides, etc. And also bear in mind that those avocados come from all the way from Mexico. So the carbon footprint of just the travel from Mexico to Canada is huge. Your avocados come mainly from Michoacan. That's the biggest state in the world in avocado production. It also means a huge deforestation. It disturbs the bee colonies, and of course, mafias and cartels are involved in this industry, which involves a lot of money. Next slide. So I don't mean that you have to give up on your guacamole and nachos, but you need to be aware. You need to think where your products, when you purchase a product, where it comes from, to understand the supply chains and the consequences of our purchases. Otherwise, the industry won't change. We, as consumer, we have the power to change. So when we talk about the famous 3 R's, the reduce, reuse, and recycle, I think that reducing is the most important, something that the corporates, your government, the companies that sells you anything won't talk about. They don't want us to buy more, but I think that from all those 3 R's, this is the most important part. We need to buy less. And just to summarize this short presentation, that something that the CEO of McDonald's once said, that the 2 most important requirements for major success are first being in the right place, and I think that we are now in the right place, maybe even at the point of no return. And the second is doing something about it, and this is what we as consumers need to do, to think about what we purchase and where this product came from.
Thank you, Moshe. Without much ado, then we'll proceed to Jason. Jason, thank you for waiting so patiently, and I'm very eager to hear what you're saying, what you have to say.
Well, let me just summarize a few things, because I thought your question that you asked everybody was also interesting and might be far more important for the students. But let me just say we've entered a period of what I call the 3 C's: COVID, climate change, and conflict. They've caused disruption. They're already having an impact on production, pre-harvest loss, not just post-harvest loss. Climate's affecting primary productivity around the planet, not just for terrestrial areas, but also for marine areas and for seafood. And conflict, 140 million people displaced now, according to the UNHCR. Expectations of 1 to 1.5 billion by 2050. That's 1 in every 7 people at best, maybe even fewer than that. So the world is changing faster than our response. In the past, it's taken us 40 to 60 years to address issues like deforestation, overfishing, soil health, we can't take that long for climate change. We've got to react much more quickly. And I think the issue going forward is not what to think, it's how to think. I think each of us needs to take our own line of sight on the world and think of it as a kaleidoscope and turn it one notch and see what configurations come up. It's all the same pieces, but it's all kinds of different possibilities. We need to, as I say, think sideways, not just linear and not just straight ahead. So crop production is going to shift. We know that there's going to be new regions, new products, but I think value chains are going to shift too. I think the day of downstream buyers driving commodity value chains is changing because everybody needs resilient suppliers. Everybody needs to make sure that value chains work for everybody, or else they break for everybody. And so that's the kind of thing that I think is going to start changing. But just as crops move, so do pests, so do pathogens, so do other things. And we're going to need to use gene editing and other tools to actually make sure that we can address the issues that come up as we go forward. So where and how we produce food is going to change. You just heard about Vertical Ag Project. We just got one launched in St. Louis that's going to be about 5 acres that will be built in an inner city using stranded assets, both people and both the property that is abandoned, as well as water and heat coming off a thermal power plant before it is phased out of use. So we need to figure out how to use stranded assets to transition into the next economy that we want. And the economy can't just be about the products. It has to be about the people too. It has to be, so this particular plant is going to employ mostly African Americans who live in St. Louis. It's going to have a lot of formerly incarcerated people because that's who lives in this community. If we can raise $5 to $10 million, the developer of this project has agreed to set aside a profit sharing mechanism for everybody who works in the plant. Because by taking that amount of land out of shareholder value, it gives him more freedom. And we want him to develop a system like this in every city in the northern part of the United States or in Canada, because we can reduce food waste, we can double shelf life of food, and we can create a lot of jobs at the same time. We're also looking at where the next California is going to be in the US food system. We know it's not going to be in California. So we're looking at the mid-delta area where we've got the same amount of water, the same amount of land, cheaper water, cheaper labor, but we're going to do it differently. We're not going to bolt it on over 100 years. We're going to start with employee ownership. We're going to start with long-term contracts. We're going to start with profit sharing ventures. We're going to start with community bonds to help invest in this so that they also own these systems of production, not just are benefiting from them through taxes. We need to think differently. And the thing is, every country has a California. And nobody is thinking about where the next one's going to be because all the food systems are going to be disrupted. We're also, I think, coming to the end of commodities, thank God. Because what commodities have done is incredibly efficient, and they've been very good at what they do to make a ton equal a ton equal a ton anywhere. But what they don't do is tell you where something was produced or how something was produced, and that is what is critical now. If we want to address livelihoods issues, if we want to address greenhouse gases, if we want to address climate change, we have got to be able to use our supply chains to help drive the kind of change on the ground that we need. And the traders are the big impediment to that right now. So the question is, are they too big to fail? Are they going to be bailed out? Or are they going to be broken up by government? Or are they going to be too big to change and they're going to die like the dinosaurs? So we have to figure out how to decommodify commodities. And then I think going forward, the final thing I would say is that sustainability is going to be pre-competitive. We're all depending on getting it right. Future generations depend on getting it right. The data now modeling shows that with current emissions to date, even if we stop the emissions by 2500, we would still be seeing the effects. That's 21 generations. This is a long-term thing that we've unleashed that we have to address. So we need knowledge sharing. We can't afford 6,000 or 10,000 companies doing their own learning curve. We can't afford 200 governments doing their own learning curve. We can't afford 1 billion farmers on their own learning curves. We've got to start figuring out how to put data into platforms, into cloud data systems where people can download and learn from each other faster, IP will not be as important as change. And learning and changing and adopting and adapting and changing again every 5 to 6 years is going to be critical. Anyway, I'll stop with that because I think we wanted to give you a time to ask some questions.
We need to jump onto the next panel, unfortunately. What is my conclusion? We had very smart people speaking on this panel, addressing issues. And as Jason says, we don't have time to be on a learning curve separately. We need to find a way. The LIAMforum is a way to bring to the attention of young people that they're needed, that change will happen very quickly. In the previous panel, I mentioned, how can we unicorn this? And this is what Jason is addressing. If Silicon Valley can unicorn WhatsApp to grow or a Facebook, we need to unicorn sustainability. We need to unicorn agroforestry, what Martin is working, what Moshe is working, vertical farming. So with that, unfortunately, I wish I would spend another hour with you. I'm very grateful. There'll be a follow-up. These videos will be uploaded on YouTube. And we'll have a follow-up discussion. There will be a next year, there'll be another LIAMforum, and we need to unicorn as well, outreach to young people, because their energy and their vision will drive this change. I want to thank you very much, and I apologize for having too short a time to continue the discussion. Thank you.